Hello, everyone. Welcome to Methods 2. This is now week 11. And in this week, or these last few weeks, we've been working towards assignment 6, which is diagramming. And in particular, we're focusing on axonometric diagrams. Um, so, if I jump into my Rhino, what we have is our finished Rhino model of our house with the alterations that you have done to make it feel more natural to the site that we provided. First off, what I'm going to do is just create a smaller area to work with. Like I don't need the entire site, for instance. So what I'm going to do is create a box and use the command boolean split or Boolean intersection and delete or hide or just move to a new layer the rest of the topography. I've already went through this step. I've already shown this in class as well, but this is what I am left with. And again, it doesn't need to be specific. This is just what I chose to show. Um, and it's just leaving you something a little bit more manageable rather than the entire site. Um, so what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to switch to a easier method to look at this. I'm just going to choose my arc render rather than the rendered version. And now what we need to go do is set up our view to get the axonometric projection. So if I go to set view and go to isometric, I can, for instance, choose any of these directions. I'm just going to cycle through a couple of them and see which one I like most. And this is going to be the basis of our diagrams. So I can see that each one of these is going to point me into one of those cardinal directions: northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest. And from there, we can rotate if we wanted, but I would probably recommend just sticking with the default. You can tilt it a little bit if you wanted. I'm just going to do a little bit, but if you do tilt, make sure, and even if you don't tilt, make sure that you save this custom view. So I'm going to go type in named view. It's going to give me all my named views, and I'm going to save as a new name. I've already created one from class. I'm just going to save over the existing one. And now if I accidentally rotate or in the future I need to move and look at something, I can always go back to my named views and click that I have saved, like double clicking this, and it will bring me back to that saved view. Now if I hold shift and the right mouse button, I can pan. It's not changing the view, it's just moving side to side, which is fine. Now what we need to do from here is determine what kind of diagram we are creating. Based on what everyone has already submitted and worked through your progress, you should have an idea of what you want to tackle, whether that be a full exploded axonometric, like talking about all the major pieces of the house, for instance, walls, ceilings, floors, structure, all that being pulled apart. Another thing that we could look at is maybe you want to zoom into like a minute detail and focus on that. Or maybe it's a combination of many different things, maybe circulation or lighting or what have you. What I'm going to do, and pretty straightforward, is just going to be a simple exploded axon. And for that, I'm going to look into what exactly am I wanting to kind of break down into their individual pieces. One thing that kind of sticks out to me is the roof itself. So I'm going to go ahead and select all these objects on my roof layer. What I'm going to do is just move them up by some interval. First, I'm going to test like 100. I can see that didn't move it up very much from where it initially was. And so maybe I need to actually move it up more. So maybe 1,000. Now that's pretty high. And that might be too high. I'm going to bring it back down another 500. And again, this is just intervals that I can easily remember and understand when I'm moving forward. This seems like a pretty good spot. I might need to shift things up a little bit more, but maybe I'm working in intervals of 250. So that being said, thinking that the roof is going to be the tallest thing and that there's going to be something in between the roof and the original building. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to zoom in and I can rotate this view however I want. But right now, I'm just going to actually look at it at the side view. I'm going to select everything that's that structure holding up the roof, because maybe that's one thing that I'm really interested in. And that's also grabbing the exterior courtyard, or this exterior walkway, I should say, the some of the stairs and the railing, which is also fine. Maybe I also want to show that being extruded up or exploded up. And I'm going to select all those objects. I'm going to go back to my Axon view. I'm going to click the green gumball arrow. I'm going to change this to 250. There's intervals of 250. So now I can see all these elements are all spaced in intervals of 250. Now I can still see inside, I can still see the structure. Maybe I also want to explode the front half. So what I could do is go to my top view and select everything probably like in this first quadrant here, or this first section. I'm just going to move this out another 250. I can zoom in and see what that looks like. Maybe I actually don't want to touch this top piece because it's already being moved. So I'm just going to undo, I'm going to deselect those elements. Now I'm going to move that out 250. Now looking at this, is there anything else that I would like to separate from here? I'm going to just rotate my view and see if there's anything crucial happening that would tell us more information. Possibly, right? Like I could separate the building. Maybe I want to bring that out another 250. These elements as well. Right? And now when I'm looking at this, go back to my named view. Now when I'm looking at this, I can see that I have two axes of this kind of exploded axon going up from the top and then over here from the side. Maybe that's pretty good. I don't see any issue with that. I think that's pretty explanatory of what's happening with this house. If I want to get further in the weeds, I could, but again, it's not necessary. Maybe on top of this, I want to add a layer of what's happening on the inside, like either program or circulation, right? So what I might actually do is kind of rotate a little bit up. That way you can see a little bit more of what's happening on the inside. If I am doing this, I need to make sure that I resave over my view, which I'm going to do right now. I'm going to save as. I'm just going to save over that already created view. And now I have this new view, and it clearly shows everything that's happening in the interior. So now what I'm going to do is just make 2D. Selected everything, make 2D. I want to be sure to select a couple more options, which is the group output. I want to maintain source layers. And I'm going to click this new one, which is scene silhouette. I'm going to rename this as Axon. You can rename it as anything you want. That's just for me to keep track. I'm going to click OK. Now let's see how long this takes. Okay, it didn't take too long. I can go back to my top view and I can see all this line work that has been created. Again, I can clean this up if needed. It looks like it's pretty clean already. Like there's some weird stuff happening over here, of course. And I can choose to clean that up, but right now I'm not going to worry about it. Like if I needed to, I could go back and kind of connect these lines. Delete some of these lines, so on and so forth, as much as I needed. Okay. Yeah, and fixing these lines would be helpful as well, but that's a lot of lines for me to fix right now. So rather, I'm just going to move forward. Looking at this now, let me make it larger. I can do the further cleanup that is necessary. I can also look into this a little bit further. So as I can see, this blue area here, which was the glass, is not actually showing anything beyond, which is not very good. One way to tackle that is to temporarily turn off your glass layer. And I'll show you the difference between both of those right now. So I'm going to turn off my glass. This is also why you should be managing your layers appropriately. I'm going to move that to the side just so it doesn't create a new version. You can make 2D Axon. And we'll compare both of these. So now that I turned off the glass, I can actually see stuff beyond where that glass was being shown. Okay, that's very beneficial for what we're trying to show. We're trying to show more than what's actually there. And the glass in this instance is reading as a solid object rather than a transparent object or translucent object. One thing that we could do though is we have the glass here. We can go back to our layers, curves, and select this glass layer. And we can copy it using common points, like maybe this point here and this point here. And we can copy that to this layer. Now we have the benefit of both having the line work for the glass as well as the line work beyond the glass. Okay. What we can also do, I don't know why, but these lines bother me the most. So I'm just going to copy them. What we can also do is continue creating annotations in Rhino. Rather than just now exporting all this to Illustrator. I'm going to delete this because we don't need this anymore. We can create multiple layers of information in Rhino. So we have the base, which is the line work. We already have the level of information for the glass, which is great. Another thing that we can do is if we select this glass layer, and this is for the future, we can do the command. Do we want to do that command? Maybe not. Actually, no. Let's not do that command right now. What we can do now is create a new layer. I'm just going to create a new layer and call it dash lines. And I can change the line type to dashed. And what I'm going to do is just simply draw lines connecting. Well, we know that it's this is 500, so I can draw a vertical line that's 500 long, 500 inches in this case. And I can just copy this line to like the similar points in our roof, right? That way we will have to trim it. In this instance, we need to trim it above. Same thing for here. In this instance, we might even delete that because it's kind of confusing. Same thing for this one. And what we can do now is create a similar line for the structure. We know that this is raised up to 50. Create one, I can copy the others to where they need to be. Don't need to place one there because it's going to overlap with the other thing, but I could place one here. If I can snap to it. And I could also place one back here. And the last ones we can do are the horizontal ones. So if I press shift, it's going to lock me in the horizontal. That's not the direction I want to go for this. Because it was an axon, we need to follow the angle that has been determined with the lines that we already have here. So what I can do is just press one corner and press the parallel corner and press tab and will lock me in that direction. Now I can just, easily press in. This is 500. And I can copy this to the other corners. And I can do the same thing with the structure. Tab, this is 250. And copy these other ones. This is just showing where the things were being pulled apart from. Right now they're showing up as, that's weird. Right now they're showing up as solid lines, but in Illustrator we can show them as dashed. Well, I show them here as dashed as well. Yeah, just gotta zoom in a lot. But we can change that further in Illustrator. Okay, now what we'll do is put on another layer of information, which is maybe we want to distinguish what is private or like the bedrooms versus the more public area like the living room, kitchen, dining. So what I'm going to do now is just first figure out what spaces are the bedrooms. In this house, it's this room at the end and these two rooms at the other end, where everything else in between is considered public. So what we can do is create a new layer. I'm going to name them both. I'm just going to do it simply as private bedroom, and then I'm create another one that says public. So I'm going to select the private bedroom layer. I'm going to select all these lines. I'm going to use the command curve boolean. You can go in here and select the floor, maybe, of the bedroom. Also looking at where the floor intersects the windows, because that's something that I need to be aware of. I know that this area here is the window. This area here is also the window, but it's grabbing that little section. But I can fix that afterward. And I believe that's it. So what I'm going to do now is just I'm going to go back and select these other rooms, which is a lot more straightforward. Just those two areas. And I'm going to press enter. I'm going to isolate this real quick just to fix this area here. And what I'm doing is just going to move these points. Quick and dirty. Okay, now we have the private bedroom lines locked in. I can select them, I can see what they are. In Illustrator, we can assign this like a color, and it will be like a little annotation, legend, or something to denote that that is a private area. I can do the same thing for the public areas, which I can do right now. I'm going to just turn off the dash lines and the other thing just to make it a little bit easier. I'm going to do curve boolean. And I can select these areas. Maybe I won't select this exterior area. We can assume that that is public because it is outside. Select everywhere that's not the glass. Actually, you know what? I'll just turn off the glass layer in our Axon. That way it won't read those lines. And I'll go back, curve boolean. Now it's actually picking up where the glass was, which is great. I'll continue selecting these rooms. Again, this is part of the room here as well. We have some part of the room here, here, and we can keep going as much as we need. I'm not going to get too crazy with it though. We can do that for the rest of them, but for now it's fine. I'm going to press enter, and that is in my public layer. And to give you an idea of what we're trying to do here, I'm just going to hatch these in Rhino to show you. So for instance, this would be a solid fill, and we could change the color of our layer. If we go to our public and layer, I can change the color. Maybe we want that to be like a red. And then for our private bedroom, we can select the layer and we can hatch it. I can change that to like a cyan. So that's kind of like the idea that we're trying to get in Illustrator. And we can choose a lot nicer colors and play with the opacities in Illustrator. So don't hatch it in Rhino. This is just so everyone gets an idea of what's happening. I'm going to go back and turn on my layers of the glass. My axon layer, there it is. I'm going to select those hatches and just delete them. Okay, now that we have our layers of information done in Rhino, now I can start thinking about if there's anything else I need to add. At this point, I don't believe so. If you were wanting to create arrows, I would recommend, rather than creating them in Illustrator, I'd actually just recommend making them in Rhino. So you can easily draw an arrow. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not rocket science, right? It's just an arrow. Arrows are symmetrical. So we can just draw one side, mirror it, and then join it. And again, this is kind of like an ugly arrow. I can size it to be a little bit better. Like it's already 10 times better. Now what I can do is figure out like, how do I want this arrow to read? In this instance, I don't really need it because I have those dashed lines showing me where like all this is coming back together like a puzzle. But maybe I was wanting instead to show maybe circulation. And I could start showing these arrows throughout the spaces to show this idea of circulating. Or maybe it's like this idea of the house being like repeated horizontally. And maybe one way to doing that is to show it with an arrow. And I'll just do it this way. So now I have this arrow here. I'm also gonna just raise it up 250 because that's my intervals. Why not? And what I can do now is just make 2D. And it will have that same axon projection as the previous drawings. I can see that because I didn't have anything else to have it like a reference, it's just floating here. I'm going to undo that and actually go back, and I'll just select, I don't know, maybe the terrain as reference. I'll make 2D again. I can move this into place now. Delete the terrain because I don't need that there. And now I have this arrow, which we can work with later. Um, I can also move it up and down if I needed, but I think for now it's fine. What I'm going to do now is just select all these elements. Actually, do I want to do anything else before I export? I know a couple people are getting really confused exporting layers into Illustrator, and that's because Make2D creates many parent layers. You can get rid of those, right? We can move these parent layers up. We don't need them. And now we'll just have two layers, one which is curves and one which is scene silhouette curves. That's perfectly acceptable. We don't need this parent layer. Um, what we could do though is we can select our glass. Yeah, let's go through the glass real quick. I'm going to select these objects. I'm going to isolate. Well, should I isolate? Yeah, let's isolate and see what's happening with this glass. So there's a couple areas where the glass breaks. And what we could do is just, again, this is part of the cleanup stage. We can just close these glass areas as much as we need. Again, this is all up to your preference. and what you actually are needing for your diagram. I'm not going to finish. I'll do something different when I move into Illustrator. Okay, that being said, let's select everything, like all our line work. I'm going to export selected. I'm going to export it as an Illustrator file. Let's go to my files, actually. Axon diagram. I'm going to go to options. We can save this however. Right now, we're not really doing this to scale. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to click Save. So now if I were to open my Illustrator, or that file that I just created, go find it. It was Axon diagram. Okay, so this is our Axon diagram file. Again, depending on how close you are to the origin when you export and what scale you export it as, will determine if it's even visible. Right now, I do not see my drawing at all. So what that tells me is either it's too far away from the origin or the scale that I exported it was pretty off. So what I'm going to do first is just select everything and move it, type in the command move, and then I can type in the coordinates for the origin, 0, 0, 0. Now I can export selected. I'm going to just save it as a different name. Save. Instead of preserving model scale, I'm just going to do a snapshot this time. It kind of ignores the scale and just makes it this size, which is fine. Again, these drawings aren't to scale. I'm going to open that file. And here it is. That worked. I can increase the size of my artboard. This drawing's pretty square, so I can make it a square if I wanted. I can select all these objects, these lines, and if I hold shift, I can scale them proportionally to where they all get bigger at the same proportion. I can, again, select everything, and just make it all the same stroke color by double clicking our question mark donut over here and turning it all black. This is one instance where you can use color though. Not necessarily on the lines for the buildings, but more on the annotation part of it, okay? What I'm going to do is, that should have been in a new layer, so I'm going to just drag that to a different layer. Now what I'm going to do is assign everything. Again, I'm just going to select everything. I'm going to assign it like a pretty low line weight. That looks pretty good. I could go even a little bit lower, I think. Maybe 0.4. Yeah, I mean, I have no issue with that. However, I did keep one layer that I didn't really talk about. which was the scene silhouettes from our Make 2D. And I can select all these scene silhouettes if I hold Control. And I can actually assign these a little bit of a higher line weight, like a 1. And that actually kind of grounds our drawing, right? It gives focus to this is everything. Again, maybe 1 is too dark. You can go back and select through and change these a little bit differently, right? Maybe it's just 0.75 is needed. You can determine that yourself. Didn't select those. Whatever it is. The order of operations is usually the terrain and like the we'll call them the supporting actors or actresses. Those are normally like the lighter line weights. The building is like the middle line weight. The scene silhouette, which is just another name for the outline of everything, is typically one of the heavier line weights. And then annotation usually is really heavy. Except in instances like these dashed lines. These dashed lines are just for an idea of how this whole thing comes together. It shouldn't be the most loud thing. We don't want to draw too much attention to that. So I'm going to actually even lower this to like 0.25. I'm going to change the stroke as well. These are dashed lines. And let's just go like 10 and 10. I'm not sure what that's going to give us, but that's pretty good. I'll do a little bit smaller though, just because I really don't really want to see these. 5 and 5, right? Like that's pretty good. It's not very heavy. It's not very dark. You can even change these to be gray lines. Like these don't need to be black. I can give them a slight gray color. That way they kind of fade in the distance a little bit more. However, like this arrow, like that should probably be a pretty decent line weight. Like it's very diagrammatic. Maybe 3 is too much. Actually, I liked 3. Also, I can see that there is a line in the middle here. Maybe we want to actually hide that line. And I can give that a white color. What we could also do is give this a gradient, giving it an idea of more movement, right? Maybe we're actually trying to show the idea of opening back onto the lake in this diagram. I'm not sure. Again, that's up for your design choices. That's fine for me. Again, this can be a color, this can be anything. This is where we kind of get the fun of using the color. Another thing that we can use the color on that we have previously discussed is the idea of the public versus private program. So I can select my public. Again, this doesn't necessarily need a line weight, right? It's not a physical thing. But what we can do is give it a color. And let's say that the public is blue, and any of these colors would do. And that the private is red. Again, these colors are very, very strong. They're very like eye-popping, kind of a little bit distracting in a way. What we could do instead is we could select those again and we could come up here and lower their opacity. Give them a little bit of a muted color. Not so saturated. And now they kind of don't scream out at me so much. What we could also do is we can come in here and we're in this public area right now. we need to kind of create a little legend for it. Same thing for our private. However, these should be, the same. I'm just gonna size these to be the same. I can space them out however I need, and I can add text. And this is how we understand what you're trying to show. If it didn't have a legend, we wouldn't really know what you're trying to show in this diagram. I just can say private. I'm going to put this on a new layer actually. Can copy by pressing Alt, and then if I hold Shift, it will copy it down in the same location. And I can name this as public. Okay, that's basically all that we need to do for our diagram. There's a couple instances here that we could clean up. Again, this is clean up in Rhino. Like this scene silhouette, this should actually be closed here. But this is all things that we can clean up in Rhino before we move into Illustrator. But hopefully this helps understand what we can do in Illustrator. Maybe I think that this is a little bit too high or a little too low, and I can drag it up. I can also add annotation to this as well. Like maybe I want this to read as views toward lake. Right, that's kind of what we decided that was meaning. We can rotate this. Trying to get those to be parallel. Yeah, that's pretty good. There we go. The last thing that was talked about was adding shadows. And we can add shadows. I'm going to jump back into Rhino real quick. And I'm going to, well, I don't need this anymore. Look at our building. And to add shadows, first we need to change it to the right display mode. And I'm just going to, for the most accurate shadows, you need to use the rendered display mode. Currently, it's very dark. Like there is no light. That's because there is no lights active. If we were to use the sun command, I'm just going to type sun. It will give me the sun panel, which is a light panel. And I can type this to be on, and now I can automatically see I have shadows. What I could also do is come down here, specify the day, the time, and the location. Right now we're off the coast of Africa, it looks like, but I think the closest that we can get to currently is Oklahoma City. So I can be located in Oklahoma City. And I can change the time of day to get more dramatic or less dramatic shadows. Doesn't really matter to me necessarily. I can leave it there. That's fine. I would also like you to be aware of if you are like exploding your diagram like this, there will be instances where like this roof is giving an inaccurate shadow, as I can see here. What I could do, there's a couple things I could do. I could either save it as is and just know that it's inaccurate, I could also hide these elements and show it without these objects here, and it would just be the base file, like the base shadows. Another thing I could do is put everything back together, like as a complete box, and kind of give me uh, a base option, like the base building, and just add it to our diagram. Like we have the base with the shadows and everything, and that's a whole different diagram though, right? Um, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to use this as my drawing, as my element. Uh, Again, you probably want it to be a white model. So I'm going to get rid of all these elements that give it color. I'm just going to go back to default material. I'm going to do this quickly for all of them by just holding shift, clicking the material, selecting the default material, clicking OK. We still have, oh, I missed it. Right? We don't need all those colors. We just want to see the shadows themselves unobstructed. I will say, however, there is one exception to that, which is the glass. We don't want that to be shown as solid. We want that to be shown as glass, like something transparent, lucent. There we go. That's more accurate. What we can do is uh, go to our view and go to capture and go to file. When we're doing this capture to file, we can turn on transparent background. We don't want the background, right? And we can click OK. Go to my assignments. I'll save it here. I'll just name it shadows. I'm going to go back to my Illustrator, and I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to throw this layer on the very bottom. Like I want all the line work to be above this layer. And I'm just going to go to my assignments, select my shadows drawing. I'm going to throw it in here. Since I had that layer, that new layer selected, it automatically pasted to that layer. And all I need to do now is do the painstaking process of matching this photo to the drawing. Because our projections are the same, we didn't change our view, it will line up. It's just going to take a little bit of time and effort to get it there. Because it's very finicky. Oops. I did a bad thing. I didn't hold shift when I was scaling. So it's got all stretched and distorted. Make sure you're holding shift or it will distort it unproportionately. And again, I can keep playing with this to get it perfect. But that's pretty darn close. And now I have a shaded model bearing that I'm not showing what's happening with the roof. This is kind of showing me more of like what's happening with the windows on the sides. That this is a like shaded walkway area that's always in the shadow based on where we're located in the world. Um, Give us a little bit more levels of information on this diagram, but again, it's not needed if that's not what you're going for. I can also see that with all this as well, right? Like I now see part of the site within my building, which is not good. What we need to do is go back and figure out where that layer is, or even where that, if I create a new layer on top of here, I can select all these elements. Okay, let's do this better. I'm going to select all these elements, barring the legend and stuff. I'm going to copy them and put them in this new layer. Move them. Well, instead of just copy like that, I'm going to paste in place. Select the layer that I want to paste into, paste in place. Now they're all in this one layer. I can do my live paint, which is K, and I can select the layers that I need to basically paint white for better, right? And I can go through and paint all these areas white. Again, that's going to be a lot of areas because it wasn't really supposed to show all this because these are solid elements. There's no way that this would be showing through the ground, or the ground would be showing through these elements. Same thing as over here. Like these are solid elements. The ground wouldn't be shown behind these. So I can keep doing this as much as I need. I think everyone kind of understands what I'm getting at though. If not, we can talk about this in class as well. But there we go. So you could also add entourage into your diagrams if you needed. And we can use the same entourage that we were using for our sections. Like these people and trees. I don't want to open it like that. So I'll just open it separately and drag the individual tree in here. Well, let's get a better one. Let's get this one. Again, I can throw this tree in here. Because it is a straight up and down tree, it still maintains that same projection style. There's nothing I need to do about it. I can move it to a new layer though. That might be smart. I can change the color again, right? Can even lower the opacity. That way we can kind of see through it. Probably need to change the line weight as well. It's one of the lowest line weights. And we can keep adding however much we need. And this is kind of just giving more life and character to your diagram. Okay. I believe that's all for now. Yeah. Again, these don't need to be line weighted. And this doesn't need to be there. But these was just quick errors for. Anyways, I think that's it for me. That's how we create these diagrams. If we have any questions, we can talk about them in class. That's it. Hope everyone has a great time.